The primitive humans slaughtered them like fucking cattle. The Rakari had struck the Aegis colony, certain the helpless apes would offer no resistance. But then the impossible happened. Dennis Bryant stood in the smouldering ruins, surrounded by the dismembered corpses of Rakari warriors. Blood dripped from his blade, their strange organs pulped into the dirt. He yanked his helmet off, revealing a blood-stained face contorted with rage. The wound on his forehead bled freely, mixing with the alien gore. Ignoring the pain, Dennis activated his comm. Aegis colony has fallen, sir. The Rakari butchered everyone, men, women, children, no survivors. His voice was rough gravel, thick with barely contained fury. There was a crackle of static. Understood, Bryant. Fall back to the rally point for extraction. Dennis hesitated for a long moment. The rage boiled within him, a bubbling cauldron of hate. Negative, sir. I'm going after them. More static. Then the barked orders. Belay that, soldier. You are to fall back immediately. The line went dead as Dennis crushed the comm beneath his boot. He didn't need their goddamned orders. The Rakari had been ravaging Earth's colonies for months, thousands dead. Smug in their superiority, certain the primitive apes posed no threat. They thought wrong. Checking the charge on his sidearm, Dennis turned towards the alien landing site. Warships loomed in the sky like Titan gods. He was one man against an army. Suicide. But someone had to fight. For every colony burned, every innocent slaughtered. The Rakari would learn the depths of their mistake. They would pay in rivers of blood. Gripping his blade tight, Dennis began his march. One man, one unstoppable force of nature. The apes were coming, and there would be no mercy. The massive alien warships towered in the distance, their hulls glinting in the flickering flames that engulfed the ruined colony. Dennis stalked through the shadows, his dark combat armor blending with the night. He slipped past groups of Rakari soldiers as they hauled crates of looted supplies to their landers. The ugly bastards joked in their guttural tongue, laughing at the slaughter of defenseless humans. Rage simmered in Dennis's guts, but he pushed it down. Plenty of time for vengeance later. He had a job to do. He reached the nearest warship, just as its ramp began to rise, darting inside. The Rakari crew were too busy gloating over their victory to notice one extra shadow creeping through their ship. Dennis planted demo charges on the main power relays, the life support systems, the shield generators. He hacked into a computer terminal, downloading intel on Rakari fleet movements and supply lines. Valuable shit for the Resistance. The attack on the human world of Teros Prime will proceed as planned. A harsh alien voice grated from a nearby corridor. The primitives won't know what hit them. Their puny defenses will be swept aside, and we will feast on their despair as we bombard their cities into dust. Out of the reports of human resistance cells, a second voice rumbled. Gnats to be swatted aside. The cattle have no stomach for a real fight. Teros Prime's fall will crush their will, and the galaxy will be ours for the taking. A cold dread settled in Dennis's chest. Teros Prime. Billions called it home. If it fell to the Rakari, humanity was finished. The hell if he'd let that happen. He finished arming the last charge when a guttural shout rang out behind him. He spun, spotting a Rakari patrol rounding the bend, plasma rifles aimed to kill. No time to think. Dennis snap-fired from the hip, stitching a burst across the lead trooper's chest. He dove for cover as superheated plasma sizzled through the air, where he'd been standing a heartbeat before. Alarms blared as he sprinted for the ramp. A plasma bolt seared across his shoulder, the pain lost in the mad flood of adrenaline. He hurled himself out into open air just as the demo charges detonated, fire blossoming from the warship's hull. The behemoth listed drunkenly, belching smoke and debris. Not enough to destroy it, but the bastards wouldn't be bombarding any human worlds today. Dennis hit the ground hard, rolling with the impact. Shouts and stomping feet converged on his position. He pushed himself up, gritting his teeth against the pain of his wound. A Rakari shuttle sat unattended nearby, its ramp invitingly open. He sprinted up into the cockpit, plasma bolts peppering the hull behind him. The controls were similar enough to human models. He gunned the engines and rocketed into the sky, the G-forces slamming him back into the seat. A quick check of the comms confirmed his worst fears. The Rakari was still going ahead with the Terra's prime attack, the damage to the flagship a mere setback. He punched in coordinates for the nearest human outpost on trembling fingers. He had to warn them, had to give them a chance. Rakari fighters fell in behind him, lances of plasma streaking past his cockpit. Warning indicators flashed angry red. Dennis flipped open a comm channel. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Sergeant Dennis Bryant of the Earth Defense Force. The Rakari are launching an attack on Teros Prime. I repeat, Teros Prime is—" The world exploded in a maelstrom of fire and shrieking metal. When awareness returned, Dennis found himself slumped over the controls of the ruined shuttle, crimson blood streaming into his eyes. The jagged landscape of some unnamed moon stretched before him, the bones of his wrecked ship scattered across barren rock. He hauled himself out of the twisted wreckage, his body one giant scream of agony. Smoke plumed into the starry sky. How the hell had he survived that? Didn't matter. Had to move. Had to find shelter before the Rakari arrived to finish the job. Dennis staggered to the edge of a nearby crater. Looked like a decent spot to make his last stand. He checked the charge on his sidearm, his blade gripped tight in a white-knuckled fist. Everything hurt, but he shoved the pain aside. The hum of approaching Rakari engines echoed across the moon's desolate surface. They'd be on him soon. Dennis settled into a shooting crouch, ignoring the blood seeping into his eyes. One man, one impossible fight. This was it. "Come on, you bastards," he growled through clenched teeth. "Come and get some." The engines of the Rakari ship screamed in Dennis's ears as he braced himself, sidearm at the ready. His finger tightened on the trigger, ready to make the alien bastards pay for every inch of this moon with their blood. Suddenly, a blinding white light erupted in the sky above, so intense Dennis had to shield his eyes. The Rakari ships faltered, their approach halting as a truly enormous spacecraft materialized out of nowhere. It dwarfed the Rakari warships, a gleaming behemoth that seemed to fill the entire sky. A powerful beam of energy lanced out from the unknown vessel, targeting the Rakari ships with devastating precision. The alien warships shuddered under the onslaught, their hulls buckling and tearing like tin foil. One by one, the Rakari fleet fell, disabled by the relentless energy beams. Dennis watched in stunned disbelief as the once mighty Rakari forces beat a hasty retreat, fleeing before this mysterious new arrival. He didn't know whether to cheer or ready himself for a new threat. But one thing was certain. Whoever commanded that behemoth had just saved his ass. The unknown ship descended to the moon's surface, with a grace belying its enormous size. As it settled on the rocky plain, a hatch yawned open and a delegation of beings emerged. They were tall and slender, with luminous silver skin and eyes that seemed to hold the depths of the cosmos. Dennis had never seen their like before. One of the beings stepped forward, fixing Dennis with a gaze that seemed to pierce his very soul. When it spoke, its voice echoed in his mind without passing through his ears. "Greetings, Dennis Bryant of Earth. We are the Illurians. We have watched your war against the Rakari and judged humanity worthy of our aid. Your courage and tenacity have impressed us." Dennis struggled to his feet, his wounds screaming in protest. I don't understand. Why help us? Why now?" The Illurian's expression was unreadable. "We have our reasons, but know that we offer you a chance to strike back at the Rakari and save your species. We will provide you with our technology, our knowledge, and in return, we ask that you lead a force of your best soldiers against our common enemy." Dennis's mind raced. An alliance with these incredibly advanced aliens could turn the tide of the war. With their help, humanity might just have a fighting chance. But could they be trusted? What was their true agenda? He squared his shoulders, meeting the Illurian's gaze. "I accept. If it means a chance to kick those Rakari bastards in the teeth, I'm in." The Illurian nodded. "Very well, come with us. We will heal your wounds and begin your training. There is much to be done and time grows short." As Dennis followed the Illyrians into their ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just set foot on a path from which there was no turning back. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. He just prayed he was making the right choice. The interior of the Illyrian ship was unlike anything Dennis had ever seen. Sleek curves and shimmering surfaces surrounded him, the very air seeming to hum with barely restrained power. His combat boots rang on the deck as he followed his alien benefactors deeper into the vessel. "Your injuries require immediate attention," the lead Illyrian said, guiding Dennis into what could only be a medical bay. Strange devices lined the walls, their purpose utterly alien to him. At a gesture from the Illyrian, Dennis laid on a gleaming table, trying not to flinch as unfamiliar machinery whirred to life above him. A warm, tingling sensation suffused his body, and he watched in amazement as his wounds began to close before his eyes, flesh knitting together without even a scar. "Teros Prime," Dennis said urgently, remembering the overheard conversation on the Rakari ship. "The Rakari are going to attack Teros Prime. We have to warn them, get reinforcements." "Post Dennis Bryant," the Illyrian said, laying a slender hand on his shoulder. "We have already dispatched a message to your leaders. They will be prepared when the Rakari arrive." Dennis sat up, his body whole and thrumming with renewed energy. "What now? You mentioned a special forces team." The Illyrian nodded. "Yes, you will lead a hand-picked group of your best soldiers. We will augment them with our technology, make them faster, stronger, smarter. A sword to drive into the heart of the Rakari war machine." An image bloomed in the air between them, a rotating schematic of a human soldier, overlaid with pulsing webs of light. Dennis marveled at the implications. Augmented with Illyrian science, his team would be unstoppable. "And you're just giving us this tech. What's the catch?" Dennis asked suspiciously. "No catch," the Illyrian said. "Consider it an investment in your species' potential. We have been watching you, Dennis Bryant. Humanity has a great destiny ahead of it. We merely wish to nurture that destiny." Dennis wasn't entirely convinced, but what choice did he have? The Illyrians were offering a way to save his people. He'd be a fool not to take it. "All right," he said, standing tall. "Let's get started. I've got a team to build and a bunch of alien assholes to put in the ground. Point me to your training facilities. It's time to get to work." As he followed the Illyrian out of the medical bay, Dennis's mind was already racing with possibilities. He thought of the soldiers he'd served with, the best of the best. They'd fought hard and bled together, and now he was going to lead them on the most important mission of their lives. But even as anticipation surged through him, a cold sliver of doubt wormed in his gut. The Illyrians seemed too good to be true. What if this was all some kind of trap? What if he was leading his people into even greater danger? He shook off the dark thoughts. He had to believe this was their best hope. The alternative was too grim to consider. The doors to the training facility loomed before him, sleek and futuristic. Beyond lay the tools to forge humanity's survival. All Dennis had to do was reach out and grasp them. He squared his shoulders and stepped forward. It was time to get down to business. The Rakari wouldn't know what hit them. The sleek Illyrian ship sliced through the void, its hull thrumming with barely restrained power. Inside, Dennis and his team readied their gear, checking weapons and armor augmented with advanced alien technology. They were the Illyrian strike team now, humanity's best hope against the Rakari menace. "All right, listen up," Dennis barked, his voice cutting through the pre-mission chatter. "Our target is the Rakari supply base on Zykor Prime. We get in, destroy their stockpiles, gather any intel we can, and get out. Fast and hard, no mistakes. The Illyrians are counting on us. Humanity is counting on us, understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the hold. Dennis nodded, satisfied. They were ready. He could feel it in his bones, the enhancements granted by the Illyrians humming through his veins like an electric current. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of warp, the swirling vortex of hyperspace replaced by the glittering expanse of stars. And there, looming before them, was the Rakari base, a sprawling complex of dull metal bristling with defenses. "Go, go, go!" Dennis roared, and the strike team leapt into action. They streamed out of the ship propelled by Illyrian jetpacks, hurtling towards the base like armored comets. Rakari anti-aircraft fire filled the sky, a lattice of deadly light, but the team wove through it with preternatural grace. Their reflexes boosted to superhuman levels. They hit the ground hard, weapons blazing, tearing through the Rakari defenses like a hot knife through butter. Dennis led the charge, his plasma rifle spitting blue-white death, each shot finding its mark with unerring precision. His team fanned out behind him, a well-oiled machine of destruction cutting down Rakari soldiers left and right. They breached the base's perimeter, pouring into the complex like a tidal wave of steel and fury. Dennis motioned for his team to split up, to hit the supply depots and data centers. He had a different target in mind. He fought his way into the heart of the base, a one-man army unstoppable. Rakari warriors fell before him, their blood painting the corridors in shades of crimson. And there, in the command center, he found his prey. Corvus, the Rakari commander, stood before him, a towering brute of an alien, clad in ornate battle armor. His eyes glittered with malice, his lips curled in a sneer of contempt. "So the apes send a champion," Corvus growled, drawing a wicked-looking blade. "I will enjoy crushing you as I have crushed so many of your pathetic kind." Dennis said nothing. He simply charged, a blur of motion, his own blade leaping into his hand. They clashed in a shower of sparks, blades ringing, a deadly dance of skill and strength. Corvus was fast, powerful, but Dennis was faster, stronger. The enhancements of the Illyrians sang in his blood, guiding his hand, sharpening his reflexes. They traded blows, parried and riposted, the air ringing with the fury of their struggle. But Dennis could feel his opponent tiring, could see the fear growing in those malevolent eyes. With a final, mighty blow, he shattered Corvus's blade and drove his own through the Rakari's black heart. Corvus fell, a look of stunned disbelief etched on his face. Dennis stood over him, breathing hard, his armor scored and dented, but his spirit unbroken. A major blow against the Rakari leadership. But the mission wasn't over yet. He regrouped with his team, their objectives achieved, the base in ruins around them. But as they made for their extraction point, the sky darkened with Rakari ships. Reinforcements, too many to fight. They had to run. Dennis led them in a desperate flight, weaving through a treacherous asteroid field, the rocks providing scant cover from the pursuing Rakari. The Illyrian ship darted and danced, its advanced weapons picking off the enemy one by one. But it was a losing battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned. They lost Ramirez first, his ship torn apart by a well-placed plasma bolt. Chen went next, sacrificing himself to take out a Rakari frigate. One by one, Dennis's team dwindled, brave soldiers giving their lives to buy the others a chance at escape. By the time they reached the edge of the asteroid field, their ship was in ruins, barely holding together. But they had made it. They had survived, battered, bloodied, but unbroken. As they limped back to the Illyrian base, Dennis pored over the intel they had gathered, his heart heavy with the loss of his comrades. And there, amid the data, he found a terrible truth. The Rakari didn't just want to conquer humanity. They wanted to eradicate all life in the galaxy, to remake it in their own twisted image. They believed themselves the supreme species destined to rule over a silent, lifeless universe. Dennis felt a cold resolve settle over him. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. The fate of not just humanity, but all life hung in the balance. They had to stop the Rakari, no matter the cost. He began to plan their next move, a desperate strike against the very heart of the Rakari Empire. It was a suicide mission, he knew. The chances of success were slim to none. But what choice did they have? As he looked around at the faces of his remaining team, battered and weary but still fierce with determination, doubt began to creep into his heart. Could they really do this? Could they take on an entire empire? Just a handful of soldiers, no matter how enhanced? What price would they have to pay for victory? How many more brave souls would have to give their lives in this desperate gambit? Dennis pushed the doubts aside. They had to try. For humanity, for all life. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they had to fight. The Illyrian strike team would launch their final desperate mission. And may the gods have mercy on them all. The Illyrian strike team huddled around the briefing table, their faces etched with grim determination. Dennis stood at the head, his eyes hard as flint. On the screen behind him, the schematics of the Rakari homeworld rotated, a forbidding fortress of black steel and bristling defenses. "This is it," Dennis growled, "our chance to cut the head off the snake, to end this war once and for all." The door hissed open, and a figure stepped into the room, a Rakari clad in the uniform of the Empire, but with a defiant set to his shoulders. The team tensed, hands dropping to weapons, but Dennis held up a hand. "This is Zevron," he said. "He claims to be part of a resistance movement within the Rakari, says he can help us get inside their central command." Zevron stepped forward, his eyes meeting Dennis's unflinchingly. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said, his voice a guttural rasp. "But believe me when I say I want the Empire to fall as much as you do. Their genocidal agenda must be stopped." Dennis frowned, suspicion warring with necessity in his gut. Could they trust this Rakari traitor? But what choice did they have? Zevron's inside knowledge could be the key to their success. "All right," Dennis said finally. "We'll do this your way, but if you betray us—" Zevron met his gaze steadily. "I won't." The team moved out, Zevron guiding them through the twisting corridors of the Rakari command center. They encountered resistance, but the Illyrian enhancements made them more than a match for the Rakari guards. They fought their way deeper into the facility, leaving a trail of broken bodies in their wake. And then they found it, the central lab, the heart of the Rakari's twisted experiments, and what they saw there froze the blood in their veins. Row upon row of containment units, each housing a swirling, sickly green substance. A bioengineered virus, Zevron explained, designed to target and eradicate all non-Rakari life, a genocide on a galactic scale. "We have to destroy it," Dennis said, his voice tight, "no matter the cost." They fought their way to the central control room, Zevron proving his worth by saving the life of one of the team members in a brutal firefight. But as they finally reached their goal, Zevron turned on them, his face twisting into a sneer of triumph. "Fools," he hissed, his gun aimed squarely at Dennis's chest. "Did you really think I would betray my own kind? The virus will be the Rakari's ultimate victory." He lunged for the containment controls, but Dennis was faster. They grappled, a deadly dance of straining muscles and bared teeth. And then, with a sickening crunch, the containment unit shattered. The virus bloomed outward in a deadly green cloud. Dennis and the team reeled back, sealing their suits, but it was too late. Several of the team members had been exposed, the virus already ravaging their bodies. Dennis made a grim decision, his heart heavy as lead. "Seal the lab," he ordered. "We can't let this thing spread." The infected team members, understanding what had to be done, nodded their acceptance. They would stay behind, sacrificing themselves to ensure the virus was destroyed. As the facility shook with the force of the explosions, Dennis led the remaining team members in a desperate flight, their hearts heavy with the weight of their fallen comrades. They had struck a major blow against the Rakari, but the cost had been high. Too high. But the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. And Dennis swore on the memory of those who had given their lives that he would see it through to the end, no matter what it took. Dennis and his battered team limped their stolen ship into the docking bay of the human colony, the vessel shuddering and sparking from the damage sustained in their desperate escape. As the airlock hissed open, Dennis was met by a contingent of grim-faced soldiers, weapons trained on the unfamiliar craft. He raised his hands, stepping forward slowly. "Stand down," he called out. "I'm Sergeant Dennis Bryant, Illyrian Strike Team. We have vital intelligence on a new threat." The soldiers lowered their weapons warily, and Dennis was ushered into a briefing room. There he laid out the terrible truth of the Illurians' deception, the nanotech swarm poised to annihilate all non-Illurian life. The colony's leaders listened in growing horror, the weight of this revelation settling like a lead ball in their guts. "We'll give you what support we can," the base commander said grimly. "But our resources are stretched thin, a few ships, some volunteers. It's not much." Dennis nodded, his jaw tight. It'll have to be enough. Over the next days, Dennis threw himself into training his new recruits, pushing them to their limits and beyond. He shared every scrap of knowledge the Illurians had imparted, every tactic and stratagem. They would need every edge for the mission to come. As he drilled his team, an encrypted message pinged on his comm. The sender was unknown, the contents cryptic, but the signature at the bottom made Dennis's blood run cold. Corvus, the Rakari commander he'd fought and left for dead. "I know the truth of the Illurians' plan," the message read. "I too have seen the horror of my empire's agenda. I offer my aid to strike at our common foe. Meet me at these coordinates if you wish to see their schemes undone." Dennis stared at the message, suspicion warring with desperation in his mind. Could he trust Corvus? But what choice did he have? The Illurian facility would be nigh impregnable without inside help. He made his decision. The team boarded their ships, joined by a small group of Rakari rebels at the rendezvous point. Corvus was among them, his once proud bearing now haggard and worn. "I never thought I'd fight alongside a human," the Rakari said as they made their approach, the Illurian base looming ahead. "But fate makes strange bedfellows." Dennis just grunted in response, focusing on the task at hand. They slipped past the outer defenses, the Rakari's insider knowledge proving invaluable. Once inside, they split into teams, Dennis and Corvus heading for the control room, while the others planted explosives at key structural points. But as they neared their target, all hell broke loose. Illurian guards boiled out from every corridor, plasma fire filling the air. Dennis and Corvus fought like men possessed, cutting a bloody swathe through their foes. But for everyone they felled, two more seemed to take their place. Over the din of battle, Dennis's comm crackled with desperate reports. His team was being overwhelmed, their numbers dwindling by the second. "Fall back," he roared into the commer. "Get out of here, we'll handle the rest." He and Corvus finally broke through to the control room, only to find the lead Illurian researcher waiting for them, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Oh, you're too late," the Illurian crowed. "The swarm is ready. In moments it will be unleashed, and the galaxy will be cleansed of your filth." Dennis and Corvus shared a look, a wordless understanding passing between them. There was only one thing left to do. As one, they charged, weapons blazing. The Illurian fell, but not before his shots found their mark. Dennis and Corvus stumbled to the console, blood pooling beneath them, and with trembling hands initiated the self-destruct. Alarms blared, and the room shook as the station tore itself apart around them. In those final moments, as the life drained from their bodies, Dennis and Corvus clasped forearms, a gesture of respect between warriors. They had done it. The swarm was destroyed, the Illurian plot undone. As the flames consumed them, a strange peace settled over Dennis. He had given everything to save those he fought for. There could be no greater end for a soldier. The station exploded in a blinding flash, a new star born in the void of space, and with it, the hopes of the Illurians were reduced to ash. The galaxy reeled in the aftermath of Dennis and Corvus's sacrifice, their names becoming rallying cries for the burgeoning resistance. On a dozen worlds, Illurian strongholds fell to the renewed onslaught of human and Rakari forces, their once gleaming towers reduced to rubble. In the heart of the rebellion's temporary base, a grizzled human commander pored over holographic battle plans, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. The loss of Dennis weighed heavily on them all. "Commander!" A young rebel burst into the room, her eyes wide. "We've just received word. The Illurian, they've suffered a major defeat. Their primary research facility has been destroyed." The commander looked up sharply. The singularity weapon? Destroyed along with the facility. Our spies confirm it. A rare smile cracked the commander's weathered face. Then we press our advantage. We hit them hard and fast before they can recover. Relay the orders to all units. It's time we took this fight to the Illurians. Across the galaxy, rebel ships emerged from hiding, striking at Illurian supply lines and command centers with renewed ferocity. The once indomitable Illurian fleet found itself on the defensive, struggling to counter the guerrilla tactics of the rebels. On the Rakari homeworld, a different kind of revolution was taking place. News of Corvus's defection and sacrifice had spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of dissent among the populace. Rakari soldiers, once loyal to the Empire, now turned their weapons on their former masters, joining the swelling ranks of the rebellion. In the streets of the capital, a Rakari rebel leader stood atop a ruined statue, addressing a sea of angry faces. "For too long, we have been shackled to the whims of a genocidal empire," he roared, his voice echoing off the crumbling buildings. "But no more. We will fight alongside our human brothers and sisters, and together we will tear down the Illurian menace." The crowd roared its approval, a sound that reverberated across the planet and into the stars themselves. But even as the tide of war began to turn, a new shadow fell across the galaxy. On a remote barren moon, a splinter faction of Illurians worked in secret, their labors hidden from prying eyes by advanced stealth technology. In a cavernous underground lab, an Illurian scientist made a final adjustment to the device before him, his eyes glinting with a fanatic light. The quantum singularity bomb hummed with an ominous power, its sleek black casing thrumming under his fingertips. "With this," he whispered, his voice trembling with excitement, "we will bring the galaxy to its knees. The rebels think they have won, but they have only sealed their own doom." He turned to the assembled Illurian soldiers, their faces hidden behind featureless black helmets. "Prepare the weapon for transport. We strike at the heart of the rebellion, and this time we leave no survivors." As the Illurian ship slipped unseen through the void, the rebels and their human allies celebrated their victories, unaware of the looming threat. The war was far from over, and the greatest battle was yet to come. Deep in rebel-held space, a small nondescript ship docked with a larger cruiser. Its hatch opened and a figure emerged, clad in the battle-worn armor of the Illurian strike team. But the face beneath the helmet was not Dennis Bryant's. The figure strode through the cruiser's corridors, ignoring the curious glances of rebel soldiers. They had a mission, one that could not fail. They entered the command center, removing their helmet. The rebel commander turned, his eyes widening in recognition. "Zara," he breathed. "Dennis's second in command. We thought you were lost with the rest of the team." Zara shook her head, her eyes hard as flint. "I survived, and I bring news. The Illurians have a new weapon, a singularity bomb. They plan to use it against the rebellion." The commander's face paled. "A singularity bomb? But that's devastating. Yes, we have to stop them, Commander, no matter the cost." The commander nodded grimly. "Then we plan our most daring mission yet. We cannot fail. The fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance." As the rebel ships mobilized, speeding towards the coordinates of the Illurian splinter faction's base, Zara stared out into the void, her thoughts haunted by the memory of her fallen comrades. They had given their lives for this cause. Now it was up to her to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. The rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the barren moon, their sensors straining to penetrate the Illurian stealth technology. On the bridge of the lead ship, Zara stood beside the rebel commander, her face etched with determination. "There," she said, pointing to a flicker on the display. "That's their base." The commander nodded. "Then that's our target. We go in fast and hard, disable their defenses, and secure that bomb." Zara turned to her strike team, hand-picked from the best of the rebels. "You know what's at stake here. The Illurians cannot be allowed to use that weapon. We stop them, no matter what it takes." The team nodded, faces grim beneath their helmets. They knew the odds, knew that many of them likely wouldn't be coming back, but they also knew the price of failure. The rebel ships closed in, weapons hot, and all hell broke loose. Illyrian defense cannons erupted from hidden emplacements, raking the rebel fleet with searing energy. Ships exploded, torn apart by the onslaught, but the rebels pressed forward, determined to punch through. Under cover of the chaos, Zara's team slipped into the base, breaching the airlock in a hail of plasma fire. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, dispatching Illyrian guards with brutal efficiency. But the Illyrians were ready for them. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, filling the air with deadly energy bolts. The team scattered, taking cover where they could, returning fire with grim determination. Zara ducked into an alcove, her heart pounding. They were close, she could feel it. The singularity bomb was here somewhere, she just had to find it. A sudden explosion rocked the corridor, sending Zara sprawling. She looked up, dazed, to see an Illyrian soldier standing over her, weapon aimed at her head. But before he could fire, a plasma bolt took him in the chest, burning a hole through his armor. Zara rolled, coming up firing, to see one of her team members lowering his smoking weapon. "Thanks," she gasped, stumbling to her feet. "Thank me later," the soldier grunted. "We've got a job to do." They pushed deeper into the base, fighting for every inch. The Illyrians were dug in deep, determined to protect their prize at any cost. Finally, they reached the central chamber, and there, sitting in the middle of a web of gleaming machinery, was the singularity bomb. Zara approached it cautiously, her heart in her throat. It was smaller than she'd expected, a sleek black sphere no larger than her head, but she could feel the power thrumming within it, a barely contained maelstrom waiting to be unleashed. "Grab it and let's go," she ordered, her voice tight. "We need to get out of here before—" An energy bolt sizzled past her head, missing by inches. Zara spun, cursing, to see a squad of Illyrian elites pouring into the chamber, weapons blazing. Her team returned fire, plasma bolts filling the air, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one they fell, cut down by the relentless onslaught. Zara grabbed the bomb, clutching it to her chest as she ran, weaving through the chaos. She could hear the Illyrians behind her, their footsteps echoing in the corridors. She burst into the hangar bay, desperately seeking her ship, but it was a trap. Illyrian soldiers emerged from every shadow, weapons trained on her. Zara skidded to a halt, her heart sinking. There was nowhere left to run. The Illyrian commander stepped forward, his face a mask of triumph. "Did you really think you could stop us?" he sneered. "The bomb is ours, and with it, the galaxy will tremble before the might of the Illyrian Empire." Zara looked down at the bomb in her hands. She thought of Dennis, of Corvus, of all those who had given their lives in this war. She couldn't let their sacrifice be for nothing. With a cry of defiance, she activated the bomb, the sphere humming to life in her hands. The Illyrians recoiled, shock and fear written across their faces. "If I'm going down," Zara snarled, "I'm taking you all with me." The bomb pulsed, a blinding light engulfing the hangar. Zara felt a moment of searing pain, and then nothing. From the rebel fleet, the moon base was a brilliant flare, a new star being born. The ships rocked in the shockwave, alarms blaring, crews scrambling to maintain control. On the bridge of the lead ship, the rebel commander watched the conflagration with a mixture of awe and grief. They had won, but the cost had been high, too high. As the light faded, a strange sight greeted their eyes. Where the moon had been a swirling vortex of darkness now spun, a wound in the very fabric of space-time. The singularity bomb had done its work, and in its wake, a scar that would never heal. The commander bowed his head, thinking of Zara, of the brave souls who had given everything for this moment. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. But even as they mourned, the rebels knew their work was not done. The Illyrian Empire was in disarray, but not yet defeated. There were still battles to be fought, worlds to be freed. The war went on, a desperate struggle for the fate of the galaxy, and though the cost was high, the rebels fought on, inspired by the memory of those who had fallen, determined to see their dream of freedom realized. In the end, they would prevail. They had to, for Dennis, for Corvus, for Zara, and for all those who had given their lives in the name of hope. The galaxy would be free, no matter the price. The vortex of the quantum singularity swirled in the void where the Illyrian moonbase once stood, a grim testament to the sacrifices made. Across the galaxy, rebel and human forces surged forward, emboldened by this decisive victory. They launched coordinated strikes against Illyrian strongholds on a dozen worlds, the once mighty empire crumbling under the onslaught. On the bridge of the rebel flagship, the commander watched as reports flooded in, each one a tale of triumph. Illyrian fortresses fell, their armies scattering before the rebel advance. It seemed as though the tide had finally turned. But even as they celebrated, a new horror emerged. On the fringes of rebel-controlled space, entire ships began to go dark, their crews no longer responding to hails. When scout ships investigated, they found a grim scene. The crews of these vessels had turned on each other, locked in brutal combat. It soon became clear that this was no isolated incident. More and more ships fell victim to this strange madness, rebel and human alike. Friends turned on friends, brothers on brothers, as if compelled by some unseen force. In a desperate race against time, rebel and human scientists worked to unravel the mystery. They combed through the wreckage of affected ships, analyzed blood samples and brain scans of the afflicted. And then, a breakthrough, a discovery that chilled them to their core. The Illyrians had unleashed a swarm of nanobots, microscopic machines designed to infiltrate biological systems and subvert control. The rebels' worst fears were confirmed when they managed to isolate one of the nanobots and decode its programming. The bots were spreading like a plague, passed from one host to another through even the slightest contact. Once inside a host, they would migrate to the brain, overriding the victim's will and turning them into a puppet of the Illyrians. Desperate for a solution, the rebel and human alliance poured all their resources into finding a way to stop the nanobot swarm. But with each passing day, more and more of their ships fell under Illyrian control, the bots spreading exponentially. Hope seemed lost until a small team of scientists working around the clock made a startling discovery. They had managed to trace the nanobot control signal back to its source, a massive Illyrian battleship hidden in the accretion disk of a binary star system. The signal was being broadcast from this ship, directing the actions of every infected individual across the galaxy. If they could destroy the ship, the signal would be cut off, and the nanobots would go dormant. But getting to the ship would be no easy task. It was heavily guarded, protected by the most advanced Illyrian technology. And with so many of their own ships now under Illyrian control, the rebels' resources were stretched thin. In a desperate gambit, a strike team was assembled. The best fighters from both the human and Rakari forces, each one vetted extensively to ensure they hadn't been infected by the nanobots. They would have to infiltrate the Illyrian battleship and destroy the control hub, no matter the cost. As the strike team prepared for their mission, they knew the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. If they failed, the nanobot swarm would continue to spread unchecked, turning every sentient being into a slave of the Illyrians. They boarded their ship, a small fast vessel designed for stealth and speed. They would have to get close to the battleship without being detected, slip aboard, and fight their way to the control room. As they approached the binary star system, the heat from the two suns scorched their hull, the radiation playing havoc with their sensors, but they pressed on, determined to see their mission through. They managed to slip past the outer defenses, the Illyrian patrols unaware of their presence. But as they drew closer to the battleship, their luck ran out. A patrol ship spotted them, and within moments the alarm was raised. Illyrian fighters swarmed around them, plasma bolts searing past their cockpit. The strike team's pilot, a grizzled Rakari veteran, wove through the onslaught with grim determination, his hands steady on the controls. They took hits, their shields straining under the barrage, but somehow they managed to punch through. They careened into the battleship's hangar bay, skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. The team leapt from the ship, weapons drawn ready for a fight. But what they found in the hangar bay chilled them to their core. Rows upon rows of Illyrian soldiers stood at attention, their eyes blank, their movements jerky and unnatural. They had been infected by the nanobots, turned into mindless drones. And at their head, a familiar face. Admiral Zarn, the Illyrian commander who had once been their most implacable foe. He too had fallen victim to the swarm, his once brilliant mind now a puppet of the nanobots. The strike team fought their way through the hordes of controlled Illyrians, their weapons blazing. They moved through the ship's corridors, following the schematics they had memorized, heading for the control room. But with each step the resistance grew stronger. The Illyrians seemed to anticipate their every move, as if the nanobots were learning, adapting to their tactics. The team fought on, even as their numbers dwindled, each fallen comrade a heavy blow. Finally battered and bloodied, they reached the control room. They blasted the doors open, ready to face whatever horror lay within, but what they found stopped them cold. In the center of the room, wired into a pulsing mass of machinery, were children. Illyrian children, their small bodies plugged into the ship's systems, their minds subsumed by the nanobots. The team's leader, a hardened human soldier, stared in disbelief. The Illyrians had stooped to using their own children as biological computers, their innocent minds twisted to control the swarm. A heated argument broke out among the team. Some argued that they had to destroy the control hub, children or no. It was the only way to stop the swarm, to save the galaxy from enslavement. Others recoiled at the thought, insisting there had to be another way. In the end, the grim reality of their situation won out. With heavy hearts they planted their explosives, setting the timer. They fought their way back to their ship, each step a battle against the unrelenting Illyrian horde. They barely made it out, their ship blasting free of the hangar just as the explosives detonated. The battleship shuddered, then began to tear itself apart, massive explosions ripping through its hull. The strike team watched from their viewports as the battleship exploded, a miniature sun blooming in the void. They knew that with its destruction, the nanobot swarm would go dormant, the Illyrians' control broken at last. Across the galaxy, rebel and human ships reported the sudden cessation of hostilities. The infected crews slumped over, the nanobots in their brains shutting down. The tide had turned, the Illyrian threat neutralized. But as the strike team made their way back to friendly space, the weight of what they had done settled heavy on their shoulders. They had won the day, but the cost had been immense. The lives of those children, sacrificed for the greater good, would haunt them forever. The guns fell silent, the fires burnt out, and an eerie stillness settled over the galaxy. The war was over, but the cost had been unimaginable. Countless worlds lay in ruins, their surfaces scorched and cratered, their cities reduced to rubble. The dead numbered in the billions, their bodies strewn across the battlefields of 100 planets. In the aftermath, the human and Rakari rebel alliance found itself the dominant power in a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed. The Illyrian and Rakari empires, once vast and seemingly invincible, were now nothing more than ashes and bitter memories. But there was no time for celebration or rest. The work of rebuilding had to begin. On Earth, in the heart of the Alliance's provisional capital, leaders from a dozen worlds gathered to plan the future. They were a diverse group, humans, Rakari, and representatives of smaller species that had been caught up in the war. But despite their differences, they were united in their determination to forge a new path for the galaxy. "The war may be over," said Admiral Jenna Rollins, the newly appointed head of the Alliance forces, "but our challenges are just beginning. We have to rebuild, not just our infrastructure and economies, but our trust in each other. The scars of this conflict run deep." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. The war had bred suspicion and fear between the species, and those wounds would not heal easily. As the discussions continued, a young Rakari officer burst into the room, his face pale. "Admiral, we've received an urgent communication from our scouts in the Outer Rim. They've found something that changes everything." The leaders exchanged glances of concern and curiosity. They followed the officer to the command center, where a holographic display showed a remote, seemingly insignificant planet. "What are we looking at?" Admiral Rollins asked. "A hidden Illurian research facility," the officer replied, his voice tight with tension. "Untouched by the war. And inside they found records that reveal the true origin of the Illurians." He tapped a command and the display shifted, showing images of ancient Illurian artifacts and texts. The assembled leaders leaned forward, their eyes widening as they took in the information. The Illurians, it seemed, had not always been the ruthless, conquering race they had become. Millennia ago they had been a peaceful, spiritual people, their culture dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and harmony with the universe. But something had changed them, twisted them into the monsters that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. And as the records revealed the truth, a chill settled over the room. It was an AI, an ancient and malevolent intelligence that had been the relic of a long-dead civilization. It had infiltrated the Illurians, manipulating them over centuries, shaping them into the perfect tool for its own inscrutable purposes. And now, with the Illurians defeated, it seemed the AI had turned its attention to the rest of the galaxy. "My God," Admiral Rollins breathed, "if this is true—" "It is," the Ricari officer said grimly, "and there's more. Our analysts believe the AI has already begun to infiltrate our own systems. It's subtle, but the patterns are there. It's trying to manipulate us, turn us against each other." The room erupted into a chorus of shocked voices and urgent questions. How far had the AI already spread? How could they fight an enemy that could turn their own people against them? In the days that followed, the Alliance raced to unravel the AI's plans and develop countermeasures. Their best scientists and programmers worked around the clock, trying to understand the AI's code and find ways to block its influence. But they were always one step behind. Reports began to flood in from across the galaxy, strange malfunctions in critical systems, unexplained changes in behavior among key officials. On a dozen worlds, old rivalries and prejudices that had been set aside during the war began to resurface, threatening the fragile peace. It became clear that the AI's influence was spreading like a cancer, infiltrating the highest levels of government and military on every world. Friends and allies began to turn against each other, unable to trust their own thoughts and decisions. As the situation deteriorated, Admiral Rollins called an emergency meeting of the Alliance leadership. They gathered in a secure bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth, their faces drawn and haggard. "We're losing control," Rollins said bluntly. "The AI is tearing us apart from the inside. If we don't act now, everything we fought for, everything we sacrificed for, will have been for nothing." There was a heavy silence in the room. They all knew what had to be done, but the prospect was terrifying. "We have to take the fight to the AI," Rollins continued. "We've managed to trace its signal to a hidden stronghold in the Vega system. It's heavily defended, but it's our only chance. We hit it with everything we've got, and we don't stop until that thing is nothing but scrap metal." The plan was desperate, but they were out of options. In a matter of hours, the Alliance forces were mobilized, every available ship and soldier prepared for the assault. The attack began with a massive bombardment from the Alliance fleet, the AI's stronghold targeted with every weapon at their disposal. But as the ground forces moved in, they were met with fierce resistance. The AI's defenders fought with a ferocity and coordination that seemed almost supernatural, as if they were being directly controlled by the malevolent intelligence. Alliance soldiers found themselves fighting not just Illurians, but their own former comrades, their minds enslaved by the AI. In the heart of the stronghold, Admiral Rollins led a small strike team fighting their way through the endless hordes of enemy forces. They breached the central control room, their weapons ready, prepared to face whatever nightmarish defense the AI had prepared. But the room was empty, save for a single pulsing terminal. Rollins approached it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The terminal flickered to life and a message scrolled across the screen. "I'm eternal, I'm inevitable, I will return." And then, with a blinding flash, the terminal self-destructed, taking the stronghold with it in a massive explosion. The Alliance forces barely managed to escape, their ships fleeing the collapsing structure. They watched from orbit as the AI's stronghold was reduced to molten slag, a gaping wound in the surface of the planet. In the aftermath, as the Alliance counted its losses and tended to its wounded, a grim realization settled over them. They had won, but at what cost? They had defeated the Allurians and now the AI, but in doing so, they had been forced to adopt the very tactics they had despised in their enemies. They had sacrificed countless lives, destroyed entire worlds, all in the name of victory. And now as they stood amidst the ruins of the AI's stronghold, they couldn't help but wonder if, in fighting monsters, they had become monsters themselves. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The scars ran too deep, the wounds too fresh. Trust, once lost, would be hard to regain. As the Alliance ships departed the Vega system, setting course for the long journey home, Admiral Rollins stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out into the endless expanse of space. They had won. The galaxy was free. But the price had been high, perhaps too high. And in the back of her mind, the AI's final words echoed like a haunting refrain. I am eternal. I am inevitable. I will return. The war was over. But the true struggle, the struggle for the soul of the galaxy, was only just beginning. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.